We will continue with Rematch, joined by Laurits, Deputy Chairman, and Nikolaj, CEO. We had the agenda 23, and I think with your company being pressured from the outside, but also with your Dutch facility going on, I guess this is a good company to try and discuss 23 with. But Nikolaj, you can take the words from here.
Right. Thank you very much, Michael. Welcome everyone. We'll go through a short presentation and take questions as we go along. First of all, a short intro to me for those of you who don't know me, as co-founder of the company and CEO. And I've been with the company since we started and built the Danish factory. And today I am the CEO of the company. My previous career, I was a lot in finance in London. So just a brief intro to myself as the first. But today it's all about Rematch, so let's go into it. The first thing is really what has happened as Rematch from the first days until now. I will focus on a couple of things, but one of the key things is that we started the production in Herning in Denmark in 2016. So we know what we're producing. We've done that for more than 6 years, almost 7 years now. In January, it'll be 7 years. We have, over this period of time, received a lot of certificates and verifications. We also have NAP, Nordic Alpha Partners, invested us in 2019 to progress the factory, build a blueprint to build the new factories from then on. And that culminated with the Dutch factory, which we are almost opening. We have last week actually run the first test down there. So it's been assembled during the year. And that is on the back of an IPO we did last year, where we stated that we thought we could build a factory within a year. Despite some people not believing that we could do it. We have been able to do it. I'm very proud to say that the machine you can see here on the top right-hand side is actually in Tiel in Holland now. So that's very important for us. And of course, other things that are important is in France, we also have a joint venture in this period of time, and we're very close to signing the last few documents to get that rolled. But also developed a lot in the last year, or maybe even 2 years. And we recently just made a collaboration on sound panels for various purposes. So all in all, very interesting. So that's the timeline. What is the problem that Rematch is addressing? Is really a fantastic industry, the turf industry. It's a growing industry. It's something that people love to play on. It's become extremely popular in all regions of the world. Europe, very, very big. North America, the largest single market, but China and Asia is very, very big as well. Here you can see a picture. You can play football even in the mountains of Oman. You can play it anywhere, anytime, any day you like. The only issue really is the lack of a good solution once this turf has reached its end of life. You can see here in the middle, there's a couple of scenarios here, what you can do with the rolled up turf. You can put them on landfill, legal or illegal landfill. And that, of course, generates waste. One pitch alone is about 250 tons of waste. And the face fibers, the green grass that you see, is almost about 1.4 million plastic bags. So it's a significant issue, but at the same time, it's a great industry, the turf industry. So what do we do? And that's where Rematch comes into the picture, because we've developed a solution that we've been running in Herning for 6, almost 7 years, and we're running in Tiel very shortly. Is that we roll up the turf as you would if you went to incineration or landfilling, put them on a truck, drive them to our site, where we then use our patented mechanical separation technology. And in that process, we downsize it. We basically shred it apart. That's the shredder you see behind me, actually. That's the machine you use. And then we dry it to get the sand really dry. Otherwise, we can't separate it. And we separate it into clean products. In this process, we don't add any chemicals, no water, we don't subtract anything from it. So it's a pure mechanical separation with no additional waste streams. So what do we get out? We get mainly these products out on the back end here. The fibers, the green you see here, the sand and the rubber are the main components that we then sell on to other industries. And what do we from an environmental perspective then do? I think it's also important to focus on, because you could, of course, dispose it as we saw before, you could burn it, but you can also use our methodology. And we had measured our footprint, which is the first one here, which is the recycling. We emit, checking in the transport to the factory, running the machine, sending the products out again. We emit about 17 tons of CO2. And incineration, which is the most, probably the most common used methodology to get rid of this, is about 400 tons more. You see it at the bottom of the page, 417 tons. It's about 400 tons more CO2 per pitch. And that is quite a lot when a facility like ours in Thiel can process up to 250 pitches per annum. Then suddenly it amounts to 100,000 tons of CO2. So from that perspective, from an environmental perspective, it's very important that we get these turfs in and recycle them instead of incineration. So that's important. One of the other really important aspects to understand here is the predictability and the scale of the industry. I often get questioned into why do you in this niche product, or what happens if, and those are good questions, but one thing you have to understand is this is a huge market. I said before that we could run 250 pitches in a factory, a huge factory. If you look at the slide here, you see on the left-hand side in 2019, on top of there it says 41. And what we took all the turf square meters that was installed in 2019, put it on the ground, and divided by the average football size, just to make it more tangible. And that amounts to 41,000 football pitches installed globally. And that's the scale. So when I say I can recycle in a factory that we're just building now 250, and we installed 41,000 pitches in 2019, that is the scale. And then we come into the predictability. The predictability is really that it lasts for about 10 years a pitch, sometimes 8, sometimes 12, depending on the quality of the pitch, depending on the usage of the pitch. But on average, we see all the pitches we're taking in is about 10 years. We're taking in more than 800 pitches over the years by now. And if you then fast forward 10 years, on the right-hand side here, in 2029, you see the same number, 41,000 pitches. And that's the predictability I'm talking about. It doesn't matter what happens in the next 7 years, almost 6 years until 2029. I know exactly what I'm going to be doing. There's 41,000 pitches that needs to be recycled. And that is the predictability that you don't see in many industries, but we have it. We know what we're going to do for the next many years. We know the numbers installed in 2020. We know the number in 2021, and soon we'll have the number for 2022. So I can actually look about 10 years ahead in the business. So in my view, large market, plenty of opportunity, and also a predictable market. Here on the right-hand side, I just made a hypothetical solution where we would say we would have 100% market share. How many rematch factories would we have to build? And based on the 41,000 that you saw in 2019, 2020, then you can see in 2030, we have to build 166 factories to cover the demand. Of course, that's not our plan. That's too many factories, but just to give you an idea, that's the scale that we can build into. If we then talk a bit about the business model, we talked about we take in the turf, we sell the products afterwards. What do we really do? We actually get paid on various or multiple revenue streams, which is also very important because they're independent of each other. So the first one is, once we receive the turf, we get paid as if you dispose it on a landfill, if you burn it or incinerate it, we get paid about 20,000. That's an average gate fee across the factories that we have in our pipeline. And then when we sell the products again, the sand the rubber, the fiber. That's into 3 different industries again. It could also be back in the turf industry, but it could also be other industries. That's 26,000 euros per pitch. That gives us, with the capacity of 250 pitches, about 10 to 13 million euros of revenue per factory per annum. So that's how we make the money. The front end, getting in the turf, and the back end, selling the back end products. If we then look how that materializes into further economics, then the construction cost, of course, we have to build the factory. And that is just the machinery, the equipment. So not talking about buying the land or building the building, but the equipment. So it is capital intensive, 10 to 12 million. The revenue, 10 to 14 million adjusted revenue per annum. The OPEX have increased over the past year due to especially the energy costs going up, but also in general costs going up to about 8 to 9 million. And that leaves an EBITDA of 2 to 5 million, depending on the factory, in the higher end of that in most factories. And then, so what we've done on the right-hand side here is just to illustrate how that could view if we build the factories we would like to build. Our objective is to build 24 factories in total, not the 166 that I showed you before. But if we did that, we would have about 14% market share in the world. And we would, over the time period to 2031, go up to a close to a quarter, 250 million euros in revenue and be very, very profitable. So this is basically the journey we want to go on and continue on. If we look at where we are today compared to where we were, say, some months ago or even a year ago, what you see here is one of the recent pictures of our factory. It is actually 20 meters tall, so it's quite big. And it has a lot of equipment in there. We're very proud that we built it on time, but that's basically what's going to start very soon to generate these revenue streams that I just showed you. But since we looked at this a year ago, there's been some discussions in the market about what you do with rubber in turf pitches, and we expected that there will be a rubber ban coming in, and I've addressed it a couple of times before, how that will address our business. We expect it to come in at the end of 2022. It's just been postponed, the decision, due to non-agreement in the EU, but the EU Commission is basically sitting down and trying to decide on this. We still expect the rubber ban to come into effect in the beginning of next year. How does it affect our business? Because that's a question I often get asked. I don't think it affects us too much. We will see that we will have increased demand for recycling turfs that contain rubber. So we expect the demand for our product on the short term to increase. We also expect to see that the unregulated recyclers who say they recycle but don't really do it, that they will have an issue because they can't separate the rubber and the sand. So we would expect to see less competition from them in the future, and therefore have an even better market position afterwards. So that's really the main two things we see. We are already in our business selling our rubber to other industries than turf, because the purity that we get out. So from a sales perspective on the back end, again, it has little impact for us versus others in the market that will have an issue with this. We have also announced, unfortunately, due to the energy prices, where we use gas and electricity in the production, that we had to partially shut down the Danish factory to minimize the cost. That means we are running the separation of the components, but not the downsizing and drying, where we use gas. And we can do that on existing products that have been run through the first time, but needs to be run through again. So we'll do that for a period of time, while we at the same time do a couple of smaller upgrades and maintain the machine. So it's completely up to date once we are ready to run again. And we put in an order for LPG, which is a different kind of gas than the natural gas, and currently at a much lower price. And we expect that to come in at the end of Q1, beginning of Q2, and that will stabilize the cost base for the Herning facility and enable us to run again. What other initiatives have we had? Because of course we need to address this. We've addressed it with our customers, and we'll continue to do that. But we see increasing prices on the back end, on the fibers particularly, but also on the sand and the rubber. And we expect that they will increase in 2023, especially again on the fiber. We expect to see a big upside here. But also on the front end, i.e. when we get the turf in, we need to charge, and we expect to charge the customers more in 2023 than we did in 2022. Of course, I think it's natural. All companies that experience these price increases in the production will go to the customers and raise the prices. And that's of course also something that we will do to optimize it. And finally, I just want to mention, I did that just briefly before, but we have used the last 2 years together with EU Commission and experts in our team to figure out what is the optimal solution for our fibers. We have a lot of these fibers you can see in the pictures. We have in the beginning found a couple of smaller homes for it, but we're actually now seeing and reaping the benefits of the efforts that we put in the last 2 years. We just launched a collaboration with AccuPanels, where we basically make soundproofing in design, and we have and we see a huge potential here and a huge upside in the business. We hope to be able to show that in the numbers soon, but that's definitely something that we had not expected a year ago to see this significant upside. So that's quite nice to see that some of the efforts are now coming to fruition. Sorry. So that's really, I think that's, Michael, I think that's the end of the presentation.
Perfect, Nikolaj. I want to touch upon one of your expectations. You know, you have the higher energy cost and say, I also need to raise my prices. But and I'm not saying it can't be done, but I challenge you on the way that if it gets burnt, these rubber fields instead, you know, they don't have higher cost. They actually maybe have a gain on burning that field. So how is that adding in? And is it because that you know it's not acceptable to burn those fields that some customers might choose to pay a little bit more either by you or some of your competitors to get it disposed this way?
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's a good question. I think you could see from my slide before that it's really from a CO2 perspective, also from a plastic perspective, it's really not a good idea to burn. I will say though, it's not easy to burn. Let's just talk a bit about what the composition of a pitch is. If you roll it up, it's rolled up, and it's actually quite difficult to burn anything that's rolled really tightly up. But 60% of the volume of what's rolled up is wet sand. So it's not something that the incineration is thinking, oh my God, this is the best thing after sliced bread. No, this is really difficult to burn. They actually have to grind it first, so it gets into smaller pieces. So they have to do some pre-work. So it's not something when you call up incineration and they say, can I just drop by with my artificial turf? And they say, yay. So that is the first thing. Then there's the environmental impact. And I think finally, I have to say that we cannot take in all the turf there is out there. I mean, we are full. We've been full in Herning since day one. We are full in Teal. We will get our portion, but there will be a portion going to incineration. It's been happening every year because we don't have the capacity to take in all of it. So I don't expect that we will lack turf pitches, if that's your question.
And it was more that your ability to raise prices, you know, when the competition actually has you know, maybe not the same disadvantage as you. So that was also, but I think you also answered that, you know, it's not that worthwhile for them to burn it because it's mostly sand and actually not what, you know, you get energy out of.
Yeah, the energy value is quite low.
Yeah. The high energy cost, does that change your develop plans for new facilities and maybe also where you want to be in the world and what you have already planned? I guess you are pretty fixed on the next facilities, but onwards on there, does this variability or big uncertainty in energy change your plans on how to build facilities and where to be in the world?
Yeah, good question. I think a couple of things have changed it. I think the war, the bottlenecks that we see, the energy prices, of course, they have an impact. And, we are focusing more and more on profitability in our business, because I think all businesses have to do this these days. And that's a big focus for us. But in the long run, I don't see a change in what's happened. I mean, and the next plants we want to build after France and Holland, remember, they're in the US. US don't have an energy crisis. US hardly have a recession. I mean, that's a great market for us. It's always been a great market, and I don't see any change in that market. On the contrary, we've been opening up the market from a marketing perspective. Dennis, our founder, went over there in the beginning of the year, and there's tremendous demand for us to build 4 or 6 facilities over there. So I don't think that we, in the long run, see any change. I think in the short run, we're just going to focus on Holland and France, getting those built up and have the pipeline ready for the US. I think that's really the game plan.
And then there's a little bit about the capital situation. You might not be that maybe be your biggest enemy in 23. Those situations more than the economic situation in the world. How much of the short-term building plans are financed by existing capital, secured loans, or subsidies? And if you want to raise capital sometimes in the future, will investors have data, out of Holland? Running fully, so we get a picture of this new facility that it will actually run profitable on in these current market environments.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's always been our plan to continue to raise capital, because it's a very capital-intensive journey. I said that before, 10 to 12 million per factory, and of course we want to build as many as we can because they're highly profitable. So that's the first part. What we've seen in the last year, which was a bit unexpected, was that we see the national, or the countries that we go into, are very eager to support it from a subsidy perspective. We didn't expect that a year ago, so that's a positive news. In terms of financing, for instance, the Dutch facility, I mean, it's paid, so that's done. The French facility, I expect to be able to make a short statement about that recently. Sorry, not recently, but soon. But for now, I can say that we are very, very close to having everything signed that we need to, including the equipment, so we can move on. So that is not an issue either. And then we go over to the US, and for that we will need to raise capital, especially because we're looking to really make an impact over there, not building one factory at a time, but maybe 4 to 6. So we will look to raise capital in 2023. I said that before. And it will be debt or equity, depending on the conditions. But that's what we're looking to do.
And then there's a question here: should it be equity capital, and should you go to market and investors? Will it be on the, you might say, the shoulders of you showing the Dutch facility? It's twice the Danish facility. I guess this is your blueprint for the future. This is where the data really should be, the data that you as an investor should value on or decide on.
Yeah. I think if you're looking at the Dutch factory, let's be realistic. We hope that the hot commissioning will end in December, or sorry, it will start in December so that we're ready and we can run. And that means we will have a phase-in period for the Dutch factory. We expect that to take 6 months. So that means in Q3 next year, we hope to show the output numbers of the Dutch factory that we've set out originally. And it's clear that is, of course, also a milestone for us. And I think on the back of that, it would be a good point in time to raise capital, for instance, for the US market.
And for investors, maybe not in a process, we don't know whether you go to market, equity, or debt, of course. Will it be split out in the next year's reporting so we can start following, you might say the Danish facility, which is never supposed to really run that profitable because of size, and the Dutch facility, so we get a very clear picture on how the case is running in the current environment.
We will exactly do that. I think it's important for the investors to get visibility, especially in the Dutch factory. So we will try and come with reporting so that we can show these numbers, because I think that's so important for everyone. So yeah, we haven't said exactly or decided exactly how we want to do it yet, but we will come up with something so it makes it visible.
I understand it can be difficult sometimes to split some costs. And then a final question I'm thinking on, in the current environment, do we actually expect the Dutch facility to be profitable on which levels in 24? And I know it needs to run full capacity before we get the real picture.
Yeah. Honestly, Michael, especially with the developments that we see on the back end in the last year, I expect the same profitability I expected a year ago in the Dutch factory.
Perfect.
For 2024. So I don't see any difference there. And it's really because we've been developing on the back end quite a bit, and I could see that will pull us in that direction.
And that we will also see a little bit on the Danish side, I guess, the back end, if you're able to raise prices.
Yes.
So that's worth to follow 23.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you to you, Nikolaj and Laurits, for taking us through the company and giving us a sneak peek into 2023.
Thank you, Michael.